the other thing that I thought was really far-sighted when Hal Wallace signed him, saw him in a play that didn't last long, and then Hal signed him, brought him to Hollywood, and then put him in a film that we've shown here called Desert Fury. And before Desert
Which I've never seen.
Yeah. But before Desert Fury was released, Mark Hellinger ended up borrowing from Hal Wallace. Somebody apparently took some of the footage from Desert Fury, snuck it, gave it to Hellinger, and Hellinger borrowed your dad to do that. But when your dad, before he even came to Hollywood, he said, "I'm going to make my own movies." He says, "I'm not going to have these bosses," and he had these offices all over the place and so forth, and he really knew that. And then he founded the production company, which was named after your mom.
Yes, that's true. Norland Productions.
Yeah, right.
But before that, he had Hector Lancaster with Harold Hecht, James Hill.
Oh yeah.
And they did a lot, and they started producing their own movies. And
Right.
he was always very concerned about literary property. I mean, he loved to read, as
Right.
you said,
Right.
and so he was always looking for a good script and good stories and acquiring properties and sometimes bidding on books and so that's, I think this is the beginning of that idea here tonight in the film that we saw,
Right.
the idea of getting the great piece of literature and developing films. Not that he had anything to do with the development of this, but I think it was the beginning of him
thinking along those lines and
yeah.
looking for properties and so forth. And yeah, he was, your dad had these, there's a bunch of stories, particularly in his salad period of his, rage and getting angry. But it always seemed to me it was not about movie star ego, it was about the movie, the project. This is a Burt Lancaster picture. It needs to be well done. It needs to be good, and so on and so forth. Did he take his work home with him, or did he keep that pretty much separated from the family?
Well, he included us, and he did indeed take it home. If he was, he would talk to my mother certainly about what projects he was going to do, and he did want to always, do a lot of work and she encouraged him to do a lot of work that was challenging and take risks. I think being that he was a professional athlete, he believed in taking risks, but he thought they had to be intelligent risks, thought out risks. You plan for your risk. And so I think that kind of influenced the way he thought about the properties and the roles that he took. But he brought things home. I remember one time, he came home, well, I would have a lot of stories about this kind of thing, but he came home from the set of Birdman of Alcatraz in his old Robert Stroud makeup, looking like he did at the end of the film.
Yeah, but he looked like he was 82 or something.
Yeah, and he knocked on the door, and my older sister answered, and he said, he pretended to be an old man at the door needing help, and she came and got my mother and said, "Mom, there's an old man at the door, and I think you better hurry," She didn't recognize him at all, and I think she was very upset when she found out she'd been hoodwinked. But also when he was doing The Swimmer, for example, I was a kid when he was reading the script, or at least before he read the script, when he read the short story it was based on by John Cheever, and he gave it to me to read on an airplane. And then he kind of did like this, "So what did you think?" And I read it, and I'm thinking, I don't know what I think of this story. I was a kid.
Sure.
And maybe I'm 13 or something. And I thought, well, if I'm wrong and the movie's bad, what do I do? But he wanted to know what I thought of that one. So, he would certainly share things like that. But also, vis-a-vis The Swimmer, because he was taking swimming lessons, because though he knew how to swim, he could dog paddle, he didn't like to swim, he wasn't a swimmer, it was not a sport he grew up doing in New York.
So he had to take swimming lessons to be the swimmer.
He took swimming lessons from the UCLA coach who was an Olympian, and a great legend in water polo, a guy named Bob Horn. But if he was going to have to swim every day for 6 months to get ready for this picture, so were we. So we all had to take swimming lessons.
Boot camp.
It was every day. I'd come home from school and have to do 40 laps.
That's great. Now, I think it was a quote I read for your mom when he was making movies. They said, make one for the bank and make one for the art.
That's exactly what she told him.
Yeah. And he kind of stuck to that. And I think the film that was most financially successful was one that he really could have cared less about, which was
Airport.
Yeah.
He did it. He was very frank about it. He did it for the money. He knew it would make a lot of money, and then he gave the proceeds, his profits from the film, to the ACLU and to the Union Settlement House in New York. Yeah. So they still profit from Airport.
Yeah.
So.
Some of the things I've read, he really was instrumental in the career of Sydney Pollack, as well as a director. I think Sydney came on The Young Savages, which was 61, as the third assistant or something. And your dad saw something in Sydney. They became close friends, and he didn't force Sydney on anyone, but he certainly helped him in his career. And Kate Buford, and Kate's been a guest here. Her wonderful biography of your dad. There's a lot of Sydney just talking about your dad and his foibles. And he said one thing. He said, Burt was the lightest traveler in the history. He said he had a tweed jacket that he called his 1,000-miler. He shaved with soap, chino. He just was a no BS, no frills kind of guy.
He was not a clothes horse, my dad. I mean, he was not very. He wore his khakis. And his little golf shirts.
Yeah.
And he didn't care much about a wardrobe. He and Sydney actually were roommates for a period of time when they were both splitting up from their wives. Sydney went back. He and his wife reconciled.
Yeah, right.
But for a period of time, they lived together in my dad's beach house, and they were like the odd couple. I mean, Dad was the one, making the meals and that kind of stuff. And
right.
Sydney was the, I don't know. I mean, I just remember they were just really, really funny, and I think, I think I shouldn't tell this story. I think Sydney busted my little sister for doing something one time. She got really mad at him and told Dad. He told Dad. He told on her.
Oh, he tattled
But
on
they
her.
were really they were very, very good friends. And
Yeah.
Sydney had a lot of good stories to tell.
Yeah, one favorite story or nice story I read where there was this studio executive that kept bugging Sydney. I need to have lunch with Burt. You need to introduce me to Burt. I need to pitch him on this. And Sydney knew this guy was a studio suit and not a movie person and not talent. So he just knew this was the type of guy that Burt loathed about the movie business. So he kept putting this guy off. Finally, he went to your dad and said, will you have lunch with this guy? Please, just for my sake. So he did. And he said during the lunch, this guy is spinning and pitching and doing all this stuff. And Burt is just eating and not, nodding, smiling his head. And then at the end, the guy finally leaves, and Burt really didn't say anything, commit to anything. He and Sydney are walking down the street. Burt has his head down, and he says, Sydney, when's your birthday? And he said, July 1st. Why? He said, Sydney, I'm going to give you that guy for your birthday. Now, as your dad got older, you got older, did you have an opportunity to work with him professionally in the business or?
Yeah, I was trying to be a producer with little success. He actually even did give me a whole lot of properties that he had bought many, many years
rights
before.
To books.
Rights to old books that they had never been able to get off the ground, and I tried to get something going with some of those.
Yeah.
And I did get a film made, not from one of his properties. I pitched it to Sydney Pollack, who said, said yes, he was involved, I think, with TriStar at the time, and he knew the property. It turned out, so
okay.
he encouraged them to do it. It was with the writer Alan Sharp.
Right.
It didn't turn out very well. Alan directed. It was a wonderful script. And I got
wasn't
Dad
Alan
to
Sharp the guy that wrote Olzana's Ray?
He wrote Olzana's
That's
Ray.
just
Yeah.
terrific. That is one of Burt's best late pictures.
Yeah,
Terrific
he's a very,
movie.
very fine writer.
Yeah.
And my dad did a part in that. The film did not turn out terribly well.
Mhm.
But we did share offices for a long time, you know. So
That must have been interesting.
yeah, so that was fun. That was pretty wild, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Another story was Julie Dassin, who directed him in Brute Force, and Julie almost made it to 100. And he said, Burt told me a lot of stuff about how to make it very simple to be a director, where he's saying, in this scene, you really need to have your angst come up, and you really need to be confrontational, and you have to feel it, and all this other stuff. And he went on and on with this long, actor's studio type of explanation. And your dad said, oh, yeah, you mean I just give him the old snake eye. Oh, God. So talk a little bit about you, because you went from the film business and then into education. What was that process or that transition like?
I guess the first time I did any teaching was I had a class for a semester at USC where I was teaching film screenwriting, which I wasn't a writer at that point, but they really wanted people who had developed scripts and properties to kind of show the students what the process might be like, how to interact a little bit with somebody when you're developing a script. Later on, I had a writing partner. We were writing some things together, and we both decided we needed to get our teaching credentials so we could teach to pay the bills while we were writing.
Right.
And so I ended up teaching in a special ed school for a little while, and then got my credential and went on to teach special ed in English for LA Unified. So.
Oh. Hey, LA Unified. Here.
A really good school at LA Unified, by the way, called Laces, but
That's right.
still.
That's right. So, looking back now, what's your impression of your dad's legacy when you look back and you see here we are in 2019 and we're still showing your dad's films, and myself, I'm the huge Lancaster junkie, and every time The Professionals comes on TV, I will stop and watch it. I mean, I love watching him and Lee Marvin and Bob Ryan and all of that. But what do you think your father's legacy is to his profession, Hollywood, as not only an actor but as your father?
Well, I think he made a few years ago. I was involved in organizing some retrospectives on his career because it was his 100th birthday. And he made so many really good movies that it was often hard to narrow down what to show,
Right.
how to show, how to represent this career, and, with 5 movies or 10 movies. I think at UCLA we managed to do 25 movies, and there were still some we didn't show that we really would have liked to have
Right, I
shown.
think they had me out for that. I introduced The Killers and Crisscross,
Right.
right up my alley, which was fun. But there was a huge turnout for that.
I didn't even realize until that retrospective how many film noirs he did. And I'm not necessarily counting this one, but I mean, in the very beginning, it was like he did 8 or 9 film noirs right out of the box or something, and I think that was probably part of why he wanted to take control, so he could be doing something else, maybe.
Yeah, he
once in a
didn't.
while.
He was, after I think Crisscross, I think he came a conscious decision. I'm not going to be the noir chump with the face looks like I got hit with a halibut at the end of the movie. And Yvonne DiCarlo's left with the money and all of that stuff. But
Yeah, I wanted to make some movies where he got the girl.
Exactly.
I think he's part of his legacy for a lot of people who look at his career is the fact that he did produce his own movies and choose what movies he wanted to be in, up to a point. I mean, he would still have studio deals, and and there was a price to pay for that. His production company lost a lot of money on a movie called Sweet Smell of Success, which is maybe one of his best movies, but it was not successful.
Right.
And he made a deal in order to pay off all the debt on that movie. He had to do 5 pictures in a row he had to do 5 pictures for United Artists, not his own pictures, but they he didn't have to take everyone they offered, but he had to, choose amongst the offerings.
Right.
But I think that his legacy is really just, that striving for excellence. I mean, he always wanted to make a film that was interesting, entertaining. It didn't have to be as serious as this particular film,
Sure.
but sometimes it was this serious. I mean,
Right.
sometimes it was like Sweet Smells,
Yeah, that
serious as you had a heart attack. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
just really a very
That's a terrific,
funny
terrific
but bleak,
film.
bleak film.
Terrific film. And then, this is I think that movie is another instance of his striving to stretch professionally as an actor. I mean, he's playing this Walter Winchell character and reciting all of this wonderful Clifford Odets dialogue, which bears no relation to how people really talk. I mean, people
No,
don't
it's
talk
way
like
better
it, but
than
it's
they
just
talk.
so, the cat's in the bag and the bag's in the river, and all of that is just so great, and he was so great in that. So, I mean, Joanna, this has been terrific. I really appreciate you coming. You're here with your husband, and who's a filmmaker in his own
A
right.
documentarian, so
Yeah.
he's got there he is.
There he is, right in the front row with a camera, of course. At any rate, this has really been a pleasure, and I know we're going to show more Burt Lancaster films at this festival. I have yet to show the film that has maybe the best title in noir.
I'm
called
gonna guess. Kiss the blood off my
Kiss
hands.
the blood off my hands. That doesn't get any more noir than that. But at any rate, thank you so much for coming. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you.